am Carla with the Chicago Bungalow Association. We're here with Matt Wolf, a fifth-generation owner of Henry Frerk Sons. For the final episode of our Diagnosing Historic Masonry series, we're heading inside to assess foundation cracks and other common masonry issues that are typical in basements.
Let's do it.
All right, we are in the basement now, and I wanted to come down here because one of the most common questions we get from our members is them wanting to know what the white powdery stuff is on the brick walls of their basement.
Yeah, we call that efflorescence. This is a great example right here. You see all this white powdery material on the surface of the brick. And when you see that, the wall is really telling you that there's a lot of moisture getting into this wall, somewhere in this area. And so what's happening, brick and mortar naturally have all kinds of salts and minerals in it. And when water gets into the wall system, the water is picking up those salts. And as that moisture dries and wicks to the surface, it redeposits them. And when those salts redeposit, they grow crystals and produce this salt that we call efflorescence. And there's two types. The surface salt that you see in here is called efflorescence, but when that same mineral starts to grow crystals on the inside of the brickwork or the inside of the mortar, we call it subflorescence. And that's particularly harmful to masonry because as those crystals grow, they exert outward pressure from within and they can cause the brick or the mortar to completely fail. We call that spalling. This subflorescence has actually caused the face of the brick to crumble off.
At this point then, what's the best thing to do for a homeowner?
Yeah, well, number one is find out where the water is coming into the wall, right? And we need to take a look at the outside. And once we stop that source, then we can clean this up. The trick, though, you want your masonry to breathe. And what they mean by that is all masonry is going to have moisture get into it. It's how that moisture gets back out. And what we see here is kind of an extreme example. They've painted many layers of like an acrylic that looks like paint over this brickwork. And what's happening is moisture is getting in and it's not able to freely dry out. So you're getting all this efflorescence deposits behind the paint, which is causing all this blistering.
And do you have a recommendation for how best to remove the paint?
There are masonry grade paint strippers, many of them out there. Most supply houses in Chicago even offer them for free, little samples. And what's tricky with stripping old paint is we don't know what type of paint is on here, right? So it could be any number of a variety of paint strippers that'll work. So really you want to grab a couple of samples of different types of strippers that are safe for masonry and do little samples and pick the one that works the best.
And then once that's cleaned up, you can assume the brick's going to breathe pretty well if you've taken care of your moisture issues outside, and you should be okay.
Absolutely.
Another common question we get from members all the time is whether or not they should be concerned about these foundation cracks that you see in most basements, really, in the concrete. Can you talk about whether they should be worried about that or where those come from?
Yeah, cracks in concrete foundations especially are pretty common. Concrete inherently is very strong in compression, but brittle. And think about all this weight of the soil and the moisture in the soil that's pushing down and inward on the outside of these foundation walls. Gotta imagine something's gonna crack.
Is this something to be worried about?
So little hairline cracks like this, I wouldn't worry so much about them. They're very common. When the cracks, you notice movement in the cracks or the cracks open up so large that maybe you can stick a finger in, you might want to call an engineer to look at it.
So if you are going to fill those cracks, what would you recommend using?
A lot of customers come into our store and ask for epoxy, and what's nice about epoxy is you can inject it right into the crack and it does a great job of healing that crack. So if you're getting water coming through that crack, it'll solve it. The big problem that a lot of people don't think about is how strong those epoxies are. Most often they're stronger than the concrete. So if there is a little bit of movement in that area still after you've injected the crack, you might actually create another crack somewhere else.
I see. So you want something that's softer than concrete, a little more flexible, but that'll still keep the water out.
Yeah, sure. So if you're getting an active leak, you can try using a soft, flexible caulk. The best option is to go outside the foundation, excavate that area, and apply membranes on the outside of the foundation to stop the water.
Well, thank you for helping us film our How to Home series and answering all of these questions today.
My pleasure. Had a great time.